Hey guys, welcome back to the Matt Chat Podcast. Very, very, very happy today to have a good friend of mine, a guest with his big head, his huge feet, Mike Palladino, Evolution Grappling Academy. And as well as the Red Man, Christopher Joseph Shea.
The Red Man.
The Red Man.
The Red Man.
AKA the Heat Miser. Many, many things. So, very happy to have you here today, buddy. So, we wanted to bring you on today, obviously, because you're handsome. And we like you.
Thank you.
And a badass.
And that you
I'm
know,
all right.
That, you know, he's all right. Don't go with that. Let's because I got a video showing.
Dude, he outranks me and he's whipped me with his belt. He's a badass in my mind.
A video showing different. Okay, that's all I got to say.
I got about 1,000 videos showing different.
Showing different. So, on a serious note, so we wanted to bring you in today, and your story is very, very, very unique. It's
Absolutely.
unique. And it's a story that I relate to very quickly too, because it's somewhat of mine. But take us from day one to now, from the beginning of Mike Palladino through to now CEO, president, big shot in charge, Evolution Grappling Academy, also Soul Fighter affiliate. Why don't we begin with that?
All right, sure. So I my first introduction to grappling was through my dad, actually. And when I was a kid, my dad, he always worked like crazy schedule, and he worked a night shift down in the city. He moved us up here from the Bronx, which is we're like an hour and 15 minutes from the Bronx, and he moved us up here to give us a better life, but he still sacrificed driving back and forth, every day. And my father, he worked like a crazy schedule, like 4 p.m. to 4 in the morning. So when I was getting home off the bus, he had already headed out to work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then
the graveyard shift.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And, so only time I got to see my dad was sometimes on the weekends, depending on his schedule. But what we did bond over was we bonded over professional wrestling, and yeah, so he would take me to matches, go down to MSG, and that was my first introduction to grappling. And then ironically, it would be through professional wrestling that I found jiu-jitsu. On Monday Night Raw, after Monday Night Raw, it's only happened one time
The Attitude Era. The Attitude Era.
Yeah, well, for sure that. But after The Ultimate Fighter, the season debut of The Ultimate Fighter, season 1 followed Monday Night Raw. So me and my buddies, we'd watch Monday Night Raw, and then we'd watch The Ultimate Fighter.
Just by default, it was on afterwards,
exactly.
So let's see what this is.
Yes, exactly. And that's the only time, a lot of people don't know this, that was the only time that The Ultimate Fighter followed WWE Raw, because Vince McMahon was like, you're not stealing my audience, and
Exactly.
and to this day, it's still a heavy cross, of audiences. Brock Lesnar, obviously, being a big one, being a huge draw.
And now Ronda Rousey's.
Ronda Rousey, exactly.
Bobby Lashley.
Bobby Lashley, exactly. Ken Shamrock back in the day.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was my start. And I remember watching Diego Sanchez, who, he's just been in so many fights. He was undefeated at the time.
17-0, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
And he was a submission specialist, and I was just like, I want to do that. And at the time, I think I was like 16. There wasn't a whole lot of jiu-jitsu around. This is going back to the early 2000s. 2004, 2005, and there was not as many jiu-jitsu schools as there is today. You can go anywhere in the world today and go to a jiu-jitsu school. Back then, you had to travel to do jiu-jitsu, and I just couldn't do so. So that was my first looking at jiu-jitsu.
If I understand, didn't your father do judo?
My father,
didn't you have any? Didn't you see that also, or that didn't even play a part in this? It was
That was your first
professional
meet or
wrestling?
something like that.
Yeah, well, no.
Dedicated
What
to the
I was like 5 years old, and my dad was doing like a spring cleaning, and we were cleaning out his closet, and there was this judo gi, all dusty judo gi with a brown belt, and I was like,
He was a brown belt.
yeah,
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he was ready to throw it out, and I was like, you're not throwing this out, and I hung it in my closet, and it was like, to me, my dad was like my hero. I didn't get to see a whole bunch of my dad, but he, him giving me his judo gi, or me taking it out of the garbage when he was about to throw it out, was kind of like, like an icon, like Derek Jeter taking off his jersey after a game and giving it to me, So I held on to it for many years.
Very cool.
So as a kid, my dad, we would wrestle around, and he would show me some throws and whatnot. And his favorite throw was just a basic headlock throw, like Koshiguruma. And so that was like another aspect of grappling at a young age.
So did that put you in the direction saying, I need to find a jiu-jitsu school and I have to start training now? So I'm assuming that's where it
stems from.
Yeah, oh, for sure. No doubt about it, you know. And like I said, I didn't get to do jiu-jitsu until like 2 or 3 years later. I bumped into a kid from high school who was having classes out of his basement and, you know, just starting up a small program out of his basement. I was one of the first, you know, four members of that gym. And, you know, now it's turned into what it is now.
Yeah, that's great.
So talk about that. Talk about that whole growth period from when you actually started formally training and how you basically went from point A, B, C, and then end up where you are now.
Especially if you're 4 guys in a small little basement, I got to assume you also had instructional videos. You must have learned through books. I mean, what kind of rank did this guy hold, and what, you know, how advanced was he?
Yeah, so at the time he was like a fresh brown belt. He had just gotten his brown belt.
Okay.
And you know, jiu-jitsu was totally different back then. The landscape of jiu-jitsu was not what it is today, you know, with the instructional videos and the YouTube techniques. And, you know, jiu-jitsu's at the tip of your fingers if you need to see a technique right now. And there's studies being done. You know, there's guys out there like BJJ Scout who legitimately have studies on these techniques, you know, or of a grappler and the game plan that they execute. And so back then it wasn't like that. It was just kind of like a free-for-all. I remember wanting to know what De La Riva guard was, and you know, back then he didn't even know what my teacher didn't know what De La Riva guard is. Like, De La what? And I was like, De La Riva guard, you know. And I wound up buying like VHS tapes off of Budo videos, and there was
VHS, yeah.
And this guy's name was William Bittencourt, you know, and he was a Ricardo De La Riva black belt. And he did an instruction on De La Riva guard, and that was like, I think I was a blue belt back then, and yeah, so that was how I got instruction. You know,
so you had some self-teaching going on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to a big degree, I think that jiu-jitsu is, you know, you get, you know, X amount of information and your teacher knows how to guide you, but you're going to make your jiu-jitsu unique to yourself.
Yeah,
and
your own game.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how you keep.
Now here's a question. Do you feel that you've altered your game due to the nature of your feet?
Oh, so I just want to say,
and I mean that respectfully, because I'm going to see him tomorrow and he's going to kick my ass.
Well, he's Animal from the what is it, Wolverine?
Yeah.
Now what is that? All the
Beast.
Beast. Beast. That's it.
I've had
feet
size.
like an ostrich. Like I put another.
I mean, have you ever been, you know, disqualified from a tournament because people say you're using your feet too much? They can.
I've had size 12 feet since I was 12 years old. Legit.
Well, that hat looks about size 22 because the head and the feet match. So I think he's balanced when he grapples. Why he's not a weeble wobble because he's balanced from the top to the bottom. I mean, that's just
equilibrium.
Exactly.
A balance out.
He's homeostasis.
Exactly. His feet are like hands. I mean, that's basically how it works.
They are massive. I don't know why. And I'm short. I got like clown feet, you know. So it's crazy.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Keep
no. Go ahead. I don't even know where we were.
So you were continuing on. You're trained. You had in this gentleman, this brown belt.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Moving on.
So that was like senior year of high school when I started training formally. And man, I was 18 years old, and I just absolutely loved jiu-jitsu. I adored it, and you know, I from that senior year of high school, it kind of flew by, you know, and I wound up graduating high school. I took on a job. I didn't want to go to college right away because I was in high school for 5 years, and I decided to go to the workforce, and I wound up working as in the maintenance crew for the subcontractor for the MTA. We like cleaned up garbage in the parking lots and like fixed signs, you know, and I was like, you know, just daydreaming about jiu-jitsu all day when I was at the job. And from there, the company went under, right? The company went under during the recession, like 2008, 2009. And so I took that opportunity. I wound up getting unemployed, and I just trained jiu-jitsu like 3 times a day for the next year. And then after training jiu-jitsu for that much and not working, everyone was like, all right, well, you need to get a job now.
And what belt are you at this point? Still blue, or are you purple? Or?
I think I was a blue belt. Yeah, okay. I think I was a blue belt. And yeah, I'm fairly sure I was a blue belt at this point.
So the idea of teaching has not even entered your head?
No, in some weird way, it was discussed, you know, about like, you know, the passion was there and so apparent that I remember my teacher was like, yeah, no, when you're purple belt, you're going to open your own gym, you know? So, it wound up, you know, being from the get-go that I would like have a gym. And I didn't know how serious I was about it or how he was about it at that time. I just wanted to train jiu-jitsu, you know? And so I guess I started, you know, believing like you need to go get a job. You can't do jiu-jitsu. I mean, to everyone else, jiu-jitsu is karate. You know, I just got to call it.
Yeah,
it's like, hey, you're in the karate school, right? Yeah, I'm in the karate
kung
school.
fu.
Yeah.
Stop by.
Yes. Good here.
Yes. So I mean, from there, I was like, all right, I guess I need to go get a job. Everyone's telling me I need to go get a job. And so I did. I wound up working construction, and that was pretty much like a very defining time in my life.
It's a growth period to say, this is where I need to be.
Yeah, well, at first...
But not only that, when you're freaking doing that, that's hard work.
Yeah, well...
When you're beating yourself up like that...
But I think the big thing for him was he had a kind of a mentor in the process, too, who basically fed you and said, enough of this shit. You need to go do what you need to do for yourself.
Absolutely.
Because you need to follow the passion, right?
Yes.
And he's a great guy. Great guy.
This is my buddy Billy. And,
Billy's an awesome guy.
He actually was training jiu-jitsu at the time, and I knew that he had his own construction business, and so I went up to him in class when I was looking for work, and I had this vision of like, you know, that I was going to be this beautiful carpenter and this sculptor, you know? So it didn't work out that way at all. But I went up to Billy and I said, hey man, you know, if you're looking for work, you know, I'll love to give you a hand. And he said, well, you let me know when you're ready to work and I'll put you to work. And so during this whole year, I had been conditioned to waking up without an alarm clock, training jiu-jitsu at my own accord. And then I tell Bill, like, hey, I'm ready to work. And he's like, all right, I'll put you to work. So I had to set my alarm clock for 5:15 a.m. And we met up at the parking ride, and it was an hour drive. We had to sit on 684 in traffic on a daily basis. And we were just doing things that, I would tell you the truth, man, I don't think we're conditioned to do. You know, I wasn't conditioned to do. You know, and so this went on for 2 years. I was a laborer. You know, and like, I don't know why I was a laborer. I should have used my brains more, you know. But I was just like carrying 5 sheets of plywood up 2 floors. You know, it's like all laborers work. And after doing it for 2 years, I was just like, I want to be done with this. And I remember.
Now, are you guys talking jiu-jitsu in the car, right? Because you said he trains, you train.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
So I mean, that makes the ride go a little bit better, you know.
I think the molding is happening in those 2 years. Based on the
Absolutely.
conversation we had, like it was the molding, like, and I think Bill, if I'm not mistaken, was the one that kicked you in the ass line and said, you need to go do this.
Yes,
for this crap.
Absolutely. Bill sat me down and we came up with like, we were just on a lunch break, and Bill has always been like, Billy's always been kind of like a, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a mentor.
Mentor, yeah, that's right.
And he sat me down during our lunch break. We were on a job site, and we wrote out this blueprint for the next 5 years of my life. And
you were lucky.
Yeah,
you met this man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Squared away.
Like blessed for sure, you know. And we sat down on lunch break. We drew up this blueprint, and it was kind of crazy how in 5 years from that day, everything on that blueprint came to be, you know. And so I, at the time when we wrote out this blueprint, I'm like, oh yeah, well, you know, we'll get around to it, it'll work, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I necessarily like believed in it 100%. And so I wound up working construction for probably about another year and a half after that point. And then I really started to fall in love with jiu-jitsu. I really started to see that it could be a way for me to live my life.
Well, you also have to fall in love with the teaching aspect. But let's be honest, your position now is as a professor, as a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got to feel like, all right, I feel comfortable being able to teach this too. Yeah.
And it's funny because, you know, I remember being in high school and they were, you know, you sit around class and what do you want to be when, you know, in 2 years, you know, like when you're done with high school, what do you want to go to school for? And I had wanted to be a teacher, and it's ironic that I wound up becoming a teacher, you know.
Absolutely.
And I get to teach something that I'm truly passionate about.
Your passion always fuels your success. There's no doubt. So we get to this process, and you're like Billy fans the flames, and you're really going to where you want to go. So now you are basically looking to start this vision to make it a reality. So I think in the process, because I have knowledge of this, is that during this process, you know, you start the school in the karate school, and then you ended up at the other place, and then. So, but in that process, you also were evolving in your jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
Because if I'm not mistaken, when you started from a system, it was kind of like a no-gi system, right? Where it wasn't the traditional.
We wore a gi, but we were doing no gi. We were doing heel hooks, inside heel hooks, all in the gi.
I think talk about that process and how you ended up, you know, with Soul Fighters.
Well, before you even answer that, what do you prefer now, gi or no gi?
I mean, I like them both. To be
that's a cop out. Come on,
I
you gotta
swear.
give us one.
You know,
I swear, I really do. I thoroughly enjoy both.
All right.
You know? And I have students at my gym that are like really good in the gi, and then I got guys that don't even want to wear a gi. You know, so it's like it's really beneficial to me. And the reason I do have such a love for the gi is because the gi made me work to get better at jiu-jitsu. You know, and so this kind of segue into.
Only been saying this for how many fucking years?
Yeah, and this will segue into your question is that like you know, I came from a strict no-gi, you know, type school. And like I said, we wore a gi for sure. We did gi chokes, but we were absolutely doing inside heel hooks in the gi, and you know, not the like IBJJF style of jiu-jitsu, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know. Like Henzo's does this now, you know, and now it's big, but we were doing it back then. And then I kind of wanted to compete in IBJJF style tournaments, and so to tailor my game, I decided to reach out to
their rules.
Formiga.
You had to start
exactly. And Formiga had just came to Connecticut, and I remember reading about it on the internet, and me and my buddies were like, "Yo, this guy's over in Connecticut, you know, it's Danbury." So
it's not far.
Yeah, exactly. Especially you got to travel for good knowledge, you know. And so I wound up going to Formiga's, and I mean, it was like a completely different art, you know. I was like getting totally demolished by blue belts and purple belts, and I was a brown belt at the time. And so after 3 classes with Formiga, I said, "Man, I can't wear this belt." And he's like, "Oh, you're my friend, you're good jiu-jitsu." You know, don't BS me, Formiga. I'm taking this belt off. Okay. And then he kept.
And let me tell you something. That says a lot about your character.
Yeah. Thank you.
Not a lot of people would do that.
Yeah. You got to be honest with yourself.
Well, the mat doesn't lie.
The mat doesn't lie. Exactly. And it's weird how, in a way, like you can like, I see it all the time in general, but like people have this false perception of themselves. You know what I mean? Oh. And I don't have that at all. You know, I'm super honest with myself.
But it's the willingness. Like I said, we talked to Vlad about this, and when he was here about the ranking system. And I know you and I have had discussions about it. And we're pretty much on the same page for a little caveat here and there. But you hit the nail on the head. Like you went there with the gi on, and like, shit, I'm not a brown belt.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is traditionally from the gi, and then you took a step back and started again at purple.
Yes.
And that's why, for me, we discussed this already, but for me, I have no use for people that received a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt when they never trained the gi.
Yeah.
I have no use for them. I don't care, friend or not. I have no use for it because I wouldn't do it. I mean, based on being a traditionalist. But anyway.
Well, in general, to kind of like capitalize on that, I feel that there are people out there who receive a rank because they, and this is what I thought for a very long time, you compare yourselves to others, right?
Right, sure,
so,
of course.
Like, a purple belt who is, let's say there's a purple belt who's, 50 years old and he has a mortgage, he only trains 3 times a day, he's got a couple kids, like his priorities are different than a 21-year-old.
Of course.
And their jiu-jitsu is totally different because the 21-year-old's there, 6 times a day. So like, for a blue belt, a 21-year-old blue belt, to compare himself to that 50-year-old purple belt and be like, that was me, that's how I was,
Right.
And I always thought like, oh, if I tap someone, my jiu-jitsu has completely changed me as a person, and the way that I think, because back when I was 18, 19, 20 and like this little rowdy kid, punk, like if I tapped someone, I'd be like, oh, then I need that belt, what I mean? Like in my head, that's how I would justify it, and that's not it at all. And so
the journey's relative.
Exactly. So what you say is like some of these guys, they'll get a black belt and they've never put on a gi, but it's because maybe they rolled with a black belt and they tap them, and maybe that teacher, because this happens too, maybe that teacher's like, oh, I'll justify him beating me by
giving him the same ranks. I don't feel so bad.
Exactly,
I mean, they're weak of character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, how many times I'm a black belt, the job is for my students to catch me.
Yeah.
And if they catch me, I'm happy because I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Teaching them.
So I'm teaching them, and then, I always tell everybody, you come after me, you're supposed to come after me. It's my job. To your point, my problem has always been, those instructors that give somebody that's trained no gi their whole fucking life, and then all of a sudden gives them a black belt.
Yeah.
And we talked about it last time. If you're doing 10th Planet, I'm all about it. It's a no-gi system.
Yep.
But if you didn't train the gi, fucking shame on you for taking that belt.
Yeah.
I don't care. And shame on that instructor. In my opinion, he should be kicked out of the IBJJF as the governing body because he knows better. Anyone that knows jiu-jitsu and its roots knows better than to do that. And the things you described, I get it, but it's not good.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Yeah, I just try to give some reason to why why
I think what you did was the right thing.
But you are the example of exactly what I've been talking about. So ultimately, you saw it for yourself. You were like, "Holy shit! Look what I need to do." So you get to that point now.
There's no rush to get your black belt.
No.
I want to do jiu-jitsu until I die.
Exactly.
So I'm not in any rush. Like, exactly. Why do I want to complete the journey in 4 years? And don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people who have completed the journey in Mike Fowler 3.5 years, and Gordon Ryan only a few years, and there's plenty, and that's totally cool. And I respect that. But in reality, I don't want to do that because like for me, jiu-jitsu is a vehicle to make me a better individual, and watched it happen. I've experienced it happen to me personally. How I grapple and how I think now compared to how I did, 8, 9 years ago or 10 years ago is completely different. And I watch it with my students. I'm gonna switch it up real quick, and I'm gonna talk about longevity in anything, right? So I have a student of mine. He's 11 or 12 years old, and he's been with me. He's one of my first kids. I have 4 kids that started with me, and he is one of the original, and he's the only one left out of the 4.
Oh wow!
And the other 3 were more technical than him. They were more mature than him from a learning perspective.
Sure.
He would be fidgeting around, messing around. I'd have to be like, "Yo, quit it," And the other kids were like, they were calm, good demeanor, exactly.
Sure.
And here we are 4 or 5 years later, and this student at the Grappling Industries in Manhattan a couple weeks back, he had 5 matches and he won all of his matches, and it was so impressive to me because I've seen him compete so many times where he would just go out there and just flop. You know what I mean? Like his parents would pay for him to do a tournament, and he would just flop. Like he didn't really care,
It's starting to click now.
It's starting to
switch
click after these years. He's the longevity, right? Like he's been in it for the long run. Here 4 or 5 years later, people who started with him have dissipated, and rightfully so. Like
the attrition rate is high.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. And here he is. And this is anything.
Perfect
You want to be good at playing guitar. You got to keep playing guitar. You're going to be way better playing guitar if you're consistent in 10 years than you are in 2 years.
Absolutely.
So it's longevity. And so circling back, I don't know why someone would want to not experience. Personally, I felt myself grow as an individual during the white belt, during the blue belt, during the purple belt. And what I noticed is I grow in these areas of my life as well, So when I grow, when I opened my own school and started to grow from purple belt to brown belt in that 2 or 3 year, window, I started to grow in my life.
I watched it.
So
when did you notice that you had your biggest growth, both on the mat and off the mat? With certain belts or certain time?
I think black belt. So
when you got your black belt, you kind of like the light shined down on you, and you said, "Ah."
Yeah. I mean, like
it's like starting all over again, though, too.
Yeah. Well, I just kind of, and that's the thing. Exactly true. I'd always played a half guard game since white belt. I played a half guard game,
right.
And when I got my black belt, all of our training partners were just smashing my half guard, and it's like, man, my half guard's non-existent, And so I needed to develop. I needed to grow. So I started playing with the lapels and playing this game, and then I started to see my game get better, and I started to see myself start to be a little bit more successful, and then I started somehow magically applying the same principle to my business.
You're getting more weapons in your arsenal.
Yes, exactly. You're just it's about growth,
Yeah.
And I take a technique like I use this example a lot, but I've been like really big on the Darce choke for the last couple months, and it's a technique that I feel that. I always generally knew the Darce choke, but now I became like a Darce choke specialist. I learned all the nuances that I never knew before, and I didn't learn until black belt. So I feel at black belt, you put your thinking cap on. You're planting seeds everywhere. You're not just planting one seed and waiting for this kind of tree to harvest. You're planting seeds everywhere.
See what opens up. And I got a question for you. It kind of goes along this. I want to get into your 100 matches.
Just about you ready?
I mean, you're talking about the mental aspect and your game changing.
Yeah.
You set a goal up for yourself.
What's going on with this?
So I set a goal. I'm calling it the road to 100, and so basically I want to have 100 matches in a year. And that's my goal.
Why did you set this goal? And then obviously, what have you developed or changed? And now that you started it.
So I set this goal because getting my black belt, I've watched, I'm going to try to make this quick, but in getting my black belt, I've watched over the years, since I was a white belt, blue belt, purple belt, I've watched some of the higher caliber grapplers on the scene, in the local scene at least, as they got their black belt, they slowly stopped competing. And whether they want to say it was to focus on their business, which is totally okay, I always feel that these guys started backing away from competing because purple belts were coming up and brown belts were coming up, and they didn't want to get beat or submitted by someone of lesser rank.
Right.
So that was a big thing, and I said, I don't care if I lose to a purple belt, I don't care if I lose to a white belt, whatever the case is, I just want to get out there and compete, and I don't want my ego to get in the way. It's funny, you get your black belt, oh, no ego, but there's an ego there. You're afraid
the higher you go up in belts, the more you're like, oh shit,
kind of want to reserve.
I wish there was 2 belts, white and black, because then I can just mix in between, it don't matter what happens.
It's really control the ego, though. That's the major thing.
That's the reason I started doing it. I don't want to be like like that.
And you think it's real important as an instructor to also compete?
I do. I personally.
I know it's personal preference.
Yeah. I think it's very important to compete. You know,
Nice
and,
example.
and it gives you a very good understanding. I'm able to coach, you know, and understand from a competitive perspective of what my students need to do.
Yeah.
And so that was why I decided to set the goal for myself. And then I've definitely, you know, been documenting how I've been feeling and how I've been thinking. And the biggest growth that I've had from this is how to approach a match mentally, you know. And
Basically, you polish your game all around as a human being, a jiu-jitsu player, and whatnot. And obviously, I think it's going into your business, you know. And we're both businessmen, so you know, and we're a tripe bit older than you, just a tripe.
very old.
Tripe.
You guys are old enough to be my granddad. So.
Oh!
Shots fired. Shots fired. So we can observe that and see, like, I can see how you've changed your business. And you said something to me the other day, like, you know, I've got to train at 8 o'clock in the morning because I've got more overhead. I've got this.
Yeah,
I've got that. And
absolutely.
listen, and anyone that has any half a brain is going to respect that and understand. So what did you do? You didn't just modify. You modified your jiu-jitsu and your business time, saying like you're giving equal attention to both.
Well, yeah, it's so important.
And that's I think most important with this 100 match goal that he has and everything else is going on. What I've viewed and what I've seen, even in your school now, it's completely matted. You
Yes.
took all the other stuff out.
Yep.
So I'm watching from the outside, you know, telling you you're doing a good job.
Let's be honest, if
You
you're
know.
also competing, you got to keep yourself accountable. So it's one thing to teach your kids, it's another thing to teach yourself,
Yes.
because guess what's going to happen on the weekend?
But one
you're,
thing-
you're going to put yourself to the test.
And I think even more from a competitor standpoint, I think the message for him, at least from my observation, is that he's showing balance across the board. You know, he's showing balance across the board, and I think ultimately that's what he's about. I mean, as far as when he says jiu-jitsu lifestyle,
Well, those feet make the balance a lot
he
easier.
don't go down for nobody. With
My
those
head. I need feet. I need big feet.
feet, head, like I said. But it's balanced across the board. And I think your story, we can go into all the other stuff and all your accolades and whatnot, but I think it's most important that what you talked about here today shows the balance
Yes.
right to the end and saying, hey, listen, I'm not just going to be one thing, I'm going to be all things.
Yes.
Yeah, you're adapting and growing
Thank you.
constantly.
And that's
Yep,
what it's
that's
all
part
about.
of jiu-jitsu.
Why don't you give a little chat, tell everyone about your academy, where it's at, where it's located, all that fun stuff.
Sure. So my academy is Evolution Grappling Academy. It's located in the awesome, hip city of Beacon, New York.
Wow.
It's actually real cool. That street is real cool.
Oh, Main
Yeah.
Street is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So come on by. You can check me out on Facebook, Evolution Grappling Academy, or my website, evolution-bjj.com.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for having me.
It's a
Awesome,
pleasure.
guys.
Thank you for
Guys,
coming.
thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
We're going to wrap it up. Match Chat Podcast, Mike Palladino, Chris Shea. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Us.